Hi there, I'm Karen McCarthy, and it's time to Karen-ize. Today's Wednesday when we talk about spiritual health, and today I want to continue our reading of the book I wrote a few years ago called, and the title is crazy, Don't Toot in a Tanning Bed and Other Life Lessons God Taught Me. To find out where that title came from, go watch part 1. It was crazy. All right, so we're on chapter 3, Shirley and Marcy. I once heard a story regarding a mother who was concerned about her kindergartner walking to school. He didn't want her walking with him, and she did want to give him the feeling that he had some independence, but she also wanted him to be safe. So she came up with an idea that would accomplish both. She asked a neighbor if she would follow him to school in the mornings, staying far enough behind him that he wouldn't notice her. The neighbor, who went for morning walks with her toddler anyway, readily agreed to change her schedule slightly to accommodate the request. For 1 week, the neighbor shadowed little Peter as he and the friend walked to school. On Friday, as they scampered along, kicking rocks and leaves in their path, Peter's friend asked, "Have you noticed that lady following us to school all week? Who is she?" Peter glanced behind them and replied, "Oh, that's just Shirley Goodnest and her daughter Marcy." "Oh, well, who exactly is she, and why is she following us every day?" "Oh, you know," Peter explained. "It's like Mom reads to me from the Bible. She always tells me Psalm 23 says, 'Surely Goodnest and Marcy will follow me all the days of my life.' I guess they finally found me." I love stories about children and how they interpret what they see and hear. Sometimes they are cute and humorous, as this story was, but other times how they interpret life is not so humorous. I do foster care and at one point had a preschooler who had significant language processing problems. So often she would misinterpret what she had heard, and it was a challenge to correct the ideas she had that were quite far from reality. This made me so aware of the power of our words. As I healed in heart and mind from the journey from the last 2 chapters, I knew that my mouth was my next step on my journey. Started with my heart and my head, and now my mouth. I had to take care of my heart and mind before I could even begin to successfully work on what seemed initially to be the problem. As I had learned in the first 2 stages of my travels, and as Matthew 12:34 tells us, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Had I attempted to try to fix my mouth first, I would have failed miserably, as I had in the past when trying to change my mouth without first looking at the underlying issues. The mouth is mentioned no less than 438 times in the Bible. I'd say that God considers the mouth and what comes out of it to be pretty important, wouldn't you? He had already told me in stage 1 of this journey that I had the power of life and death in my words. Oh, how I shudder to think of how much death I have spoken in my lifetime. Derek Prince, in his book Blessing or Curse You Choose, talks about this very issue. We need to be extremely careful how we speak because we can open doors in the spiritual world for some very powerful things to happen. This is fantastic when we're speaking God's truths and positive things, but it's deadly when we open the door to the dark side of the spiritual realm. In Genesis 1 and again in Hebrews 11, we are told that God spoke and things were created. God speaks and things happen. In Romans 4:17, Paul states that God speaks of things that don't exist as if they already exist. Excuse me. In other words, he speaks it and it becomes so. None of this was new to me. I'd heard it many times before. However, then God showed me Ephesians 5:1 and applied it within that context. And suddenly, the passage took on a whole new meaning. It says, therefore, be imitators of God. What he was teaching me was that I have the power of speaking things into existence also. Maybe not to the extent that he does, but a power nevertheless. And I needed to be oh so careful how I used that power. Remember the passage in Matthew 12 when Christ warns us that we are going to be accountable for all our idle words? I looked at that passage again and discovered that the next verse promises that by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. I want to be justified, not condemned by my words, don't you? Have you ever noticed how many of the catchy little phrases we use without thinking are actually speaking negative things into our lives? Statements such as, you never help around the house, or you never listen to what I say, are seldom true, but are gross exaggerations of truth. How many times have I said of my little dogs who were constantly underfoot, "Oh, you two drive me crazy." When I pondered the concept God was showing me of the power of our words, I began to wonder how many times I had opened doors for someone not to help or to not listen to me by saying those very words. Was I letting silly little frustrations literally drive me crazy? I've heard it often said, if I've told you once, I've told you 100 times. Does that open a door to create the necessity of saying it multiple times? How often did I say I was sick and tired of something and then wondered why I was often feeling sick and tired? I noticed that instead of commenting that my back hurt, I would say it was killing me. How was I affecting my life by those words? I have a good friend and accountability partner, Joy, whose walk in the Lord was mirroring mine at that point in my life. And we both began to notice how many times we would say little things in our conversations that could open doors to negative powers in our lives. We both realized that we needed to develop more of an awareness of our words and their impact in our lives. I became aware of just how often I said that I hated something. I just hate it when. Or that something made me crazy. It makes me crazy when. I had no desire to fill myself with hatred nor lose my sanity, but those two statements created an unrest in my soul that affected my life, and I started to be aware that I had been unaware of, until God began this work in me. I started to make more of an attempt to either say nothing or say what I really meant, such as, that frustrates me. To more fully understand God's views on the mouth and more of the power of the mouth, I began to study what the Bible has to say on the subject. Wouldn't you know, Proverbs, remember I called it previously the book of ouch, had the first thing God wanted to show me. In Proverbs 6:16-19, the author speaks of 7 things the Lord hates. Take a look at them and pay special attention to how many have to do with our words. These 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Half of the things the Lord hates involve the mouth. When I stopped to think about all the hurting people I've ministered to over the years, I realized that a good portion of what had hurt them and continued to hurt them was the power of negative words spoken into our lives. Have you ever seen the Kirk Cameron movie Fireproof? In the movie, he's trying to save his marriage by following a journal of life-changing behaviors and actions which his father gave him. Each day he adds a new behavior that will help restore the relationship or eliminates an old behavior that was contributing to the demise of the marriage. Any guesses what the first behavior was? You probably guessed it. He is to stop himself from saying anything negative. Not an easy task, as he found out, but a powerful tool in relationship building. Can you imagine a day when not a single negative thing was spoken by anyone? Mind-boggling, isn't it? At that point, I resolved to focus on the positive things God's word has to say about the mouth and our words. I had a pretty good grasp of the negative side already. Proverbs 11:9 says the righteous will be delivered through knowledge. So I decided to see what the word says about a righteous mouth. In the next chapter of Proverbs, we're told that a man of understanding holds his peace. Oh yes, little Miss Blabbermouth needed to learn that skill, and I'm still working on it, guys. Funny thing was, now that my heart and mind had gone spiritual transformation, it really was a much easier skill to master. I mentioned earlier that I need to read this book a couple times a year because I have to constantly be relearning and reapplying those things that God had taught me. It's so amazing to me the way in which our Father gives us the tools we need if we will just give ourselves over to Him. It's important to keep in mind, however, that it's our responsibility, oh, here we go, I just said this, to continually work on keeping the new skills sharp. It is oh so easy to be complacent and backslide. I found that I couldn't relax my guard against the old thought patterns, but needed to stand guard to keep those doors closed. Proverbs 8:6-8 says, listen, for I will speak of excellent things, and from the opening of my lips will come right things. For my mouth will speak truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are with righteousness. Nothing crooked or perverse is in them. Quite a thing to aspire to, isn't it? As I read that passage, I remembered a brand new teacher I worked with many years ago. She had a pretty rough time with one of the aides in her classroom. This woman was constantly saying things to the staff, parents, and students to undermine the teacher's credibility and her authority. What was amazing to me back then was that even in private, this teacher would say nothing negative about the aide. I felt she would be fully justified and would feel better if she did so, so I provided every opportunity I could to try to get her to vent. Oh, that old me wasn't happy being alone in my venting sins, was I? I now wonder if she was a Christian. She certainly was a picture of Proverbs 6:6-8. I couldn't seem to get out of the book of Proverbs. So much of this wise book deals with the mouth. In Proverbs 10:11, we're told that the words of the godly are a life-giving fountain. Proverbs 22:11 tells us that purity of heart and grace will be on our lips, and Proverbs 31:26 says that out of our mouths come wisdom and that kindness is on our tongues. When I thought of those wonderful people who have graced my life with comfort, I realized that the passage describes them beautifully. I too would be able to bring more comfort and peace into the lives of those around me if words of purity, grace, wisdom, and kindness were what consistently came out of my mouth. But how was I to accomplish this? It's not easy. My printer's going crazy. I'd tried on my own before and never succeeded. I knew that the healing of my heart and mind would help in this quest, but something was still missing. And then I found it. First, God brought my attention to two passages. Psalm 141:3 asks him to set a guard over the author's mouth and to keep a watch over the door of his lips. Proverbs 21:23 states that whoever keeps tangled tongue, whoever keeps his... Okay, we're going to go back here. Proverbs 21:23 states that whoever guards the mouth and tongue is then able to keep his soul from troubles. Okay, that's great, but what's our part in all of that? I've learned the hard way that God usually doesn't just supernaturally do it for me, instead choosing to help me through my little life lessons. So what was the lesson this time? Then he showed me Psalm 119:103, where it says that God's words are sweet to the taste, sweeter than honey on our lips. And then the key was revealed. Psalm 34:1 hit home in a big way. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. Earlier, I told you how I had discovered that my quiet time with God was enhanced by beginning with a time of praise. Now God was expanding on this by letting me know that the more I had his praise in my mouth, the more I would grow spiritually in regards to my words. I dug even deeper into his word to discover more about praise. Here are just a few of the priceless verses I found. Psalm 63:3-5. Because your loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise you. Thus I will bless you while I live. I will lift up my hands in your name. My soul shall be satisfied with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise you with joyful lips. Psalm 89:1. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make known your faithfulness to all generations. Psalm 71:8. Let my mouth be filled with your praise and your glory all the day. Psalm 149:6 regarding the saints. Let the high praises of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand. Hebrews 13:15. Therefore by him let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to God. That is the fruits of our lips, giving thanks to his name. It shouldn't have been mind-boggling, but what God revealed to me changed my perspective on everything. When my focus is on him and praise is in my heart and on my lips, everything changes. I begin to see every circumstance in a new, positive way. As I look back over my quiet time journal of those few months, I saw evidence of this. On November 14th, a cold and bleak day, I wrote, Gloomy day, Lord, brighten it with your glorious presence. On November 8th, the first day of nasty road conditions, I had to drive through those for work. I had this to say, Your winter came last night. The mountains will be majestic this morning, a reminder of your unending majesty. Provide safety today for travelers as we adjust again to slippery roads. Probably the most significant change was on October 9. Weekends were usually a very lonely time for me, and often depression would set in as friends were busy with family and I sat home alone. But on that day, my message to my father was, Blues on the weekend. So instead of feeling sorry for myself, I'll press into you. Fill me. Let me rest in you and be satisfied. Prior to my journey of healing, my daily messages to God would have been in the form of complaints, asking him to change the circumstances to fit what I wanted. It really wouldn't have occurred to me to praise him in the midst of the circumstances. I now knew the power of the words Paul wrote in Philippians 4:11. I have learned to be content in whatever the circumstances. Once I understood this concept and embraced it, my life would never be the same. Stage 3 reflection. Hebrews 13:15 says, Therefore, by him let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to God. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. I thank you, Almighty Father, for the power embedded in this verse. For when I truly do offer the sacrifice of praise continually, life takes on your abundance, no matter what the circumstances in which I find myself. Have a great day. Be blessed.